Welcome to the channel. I'm going to do a slightly different video today. This one will not include gameplay. It's more about simulation rigs and how I built mine. I often get asked questions on why mine looks the way it does, how I built it, the problems that I came across in creating it, and I thought it might be a good idea to try to explain some of those to you and the process that the process that I went through to create what I've got today. It didn't start out this way, I can assure you, and there's still plenty of ways that it can be improved in the future, and no doubt it will be. When that happens, I'll either make another video or I'll update the page on my website that covers the building of this sim rig. I'm not very good at OBS or recording. I'm still new to it, so bear with me if there's any errors along the way. I've already tried once and realised that the microphone wasn't plugged in, so it's not going to be the most professional you've ever come across. The rig I've got is knocked together. It's not a production model that looks good, but it does what I need it to do. Every rig is personal, or should be personal, and needs to cover every aspect of what you're going to need it for. I've created a PowerPoint display, which I'm going to use on my big screen above. I'm going to flick over to that in a second, and it's to display the photographs that I need to show you. So bear with me while I flick across to that, and hopefully we've still got sound and you can hear me, not like the first time I did this. Right, here we go. It's jumping now already. Let me just click on the screen up there and go to the second page. I started off with just a wide desk. It was a desk that I built out of odd scrapments. There was bits of 2 computer desks put into it, plus a few bits of wood. It suited what I needed, and it fit. I made it to fit the alcove that I had free. Uh, on this, there was actually 2 computers and 2 screens. The biggest was a 40-inch TV screen and a 22-inch monitor beside it. I used it for a variety of things. I'm an author and write books, so I need to research on one screen while I'm writing on another. I use the big screen for close-up work if I'm doing anything graphical wise or anything that needs close-up work. I also find it a lot easier on the eyes. Everything I had was crammed into that corner. That's the 2 computers, a DVD player, a radio unit separate, a big amplifier that was tucked underneath, all my paper, everything that I needed to do what I was using it for. Obviously, when I got my steering wheel and first got into gaming, this is all I had to work with. But I soon found out that attaching the steering wheel to a desk like this is not the best that you can do. I found it a pain that every time I needed to use the keyboard I had to unscrew the steering wheel and the gear stick and move them out of the way. I couldn't move the keyboard to the side because you can't type when you're not facing your screen. Similarly, when I wanted to play the game, I had to reassemble it all in the right place, moving the keyboard out the way. and I soon realised that I just had to do something different. As I said, the desk was built away my particular way of working and the need for storage. Once I'd purchased the wheel, I realised it was just not going to work. I tried to get around this by creating a sliding shelf on top of my desk, which the steering wheel was attached to and the gear stick. Uh, when I wasn't using the steering wheel, I could slide it across to the left, leaving me a workspace where I could use my keyboard in front of me. It worked, but it was not the best. There was still far too much play, especially with the gear stick. If you tried to change gear, you often missed the gear you was going for. My swivel chair, my computer gaming chair, was also a pain because every time you turn the steering wheel with the force feedback, it would rotate the chair or push the chair away from you when you pressed on the pedals. I soon realised that I needed a sim rig, not a desk. Click the page. I realised that I need to build this sim rig and that it would be far more suitable when using driving games. But then I also use the computer for a variety of things. I write books, I create websites, I also use it as a media centre for playing music and video. So I had to carefully consider all these varied uses when planning on how I wanted my sim rig to look. A standard rig that you could buy from the shops was just not suitable for this, and it would not accommodate my other needs. I came up with a checklist. I will put a link to my website where this is, so you can have a look at it later on yourself, or you can freeze the screen and look on that. It was just some of the things that you need to look at before you even start to build. Simple questions really is, what do I need to use my computer for? Is it just office work, graphics, video editing, gaming, streaming? Each thing has its own needs. What games will I be playing? Are they all going to be driving games, or are some going to be flying games? Do they have minimum running specs? Do they need separate controllers? Where can I put those controllers? What do I desire to have now and in the future? Well, at the time I only had two screens, one large, one small, but I knew that I wanted to have three matching gaming screens. So you have to think ahead. What do I already have? Well, most of them would have your computer, but there may be other parts that you need to make it all come together, such as steering wheel, pedals, gear stick, any other specialised displays, microphones, speakers, lighting. The list is endless, but again, it all depends on what you're actually going to do with your rig. Same with what will I need to buy, so you need to make yourself a shopping list. A minimal one to start with, otherwise the cost will literally go through the roof. You've then got to work out where am I going to locate it. The flat I was in had an alcove, as you might have seen from the photograph. I had very little room apart from that. Once there was no room behind my gaming chair to put anything else. If I put anything in that alcove, it could only take up the same roughly dimensions of what I was already using. I also asked what furniture do I have, if I was going to be building from scratch, recycling existing furniture such as a desk, which I did. I used bits of this and bits of that, as I did when I made my original desk. Can you build it yourself? Do you have the practical skills, the right tools, the space to build it, the computer electronics and electrical knowledge required to put it all together? My answer to that was, did I have the practical skills? I've got very basic woodworking skills and that's it. The right tools, again, I've only got very basic tools and I definitely had very little space in which to build it. I had enough computer knowledge, electronic knowledge, electrical knowledge to get by, but you can always best to get in a professional if you're going to need someone to do a lot of wiring, etc. Then ask yourself, what can you afford? Can you buy a pre-made one? Can I afford the materials to build one from scratch? Or will I need to recycle old furniture and adapt it all to suit my needs? Then what lighting and power outlets do I have in the place that I'm going to put my sim rig? You can guarantee there is never enough wall sockets, power sockets, because everything now seems to need a plug. You know, I've got 3 screens, that's 3 plugs to start with. I've got 3 tablets, that's another 3 plugs to run the power for the tablets. You need power for your steering wheel, power for lighting, power to run a microphone, everything you can think of. You need to sit down and calculate exactly how many sockets you need and how to get others fitted so you're not overloading your system. Will it be safe? I've got young grandchildren, so I've got to make sure that electrically wise it's safe. They're not going to get shocked if they come up beside it. It's made of wood, so I do not want sharp edges or for them to get splinters. I don't want it to collapse on top of them, so it has to be very secure and very stable. Apart from that, you need it stable from when you're playing the games. You've also got to ask, is the floor where I'm placing it strong enough? You may have an old house, depending on the type of flooring you have. If you put a lot of weight on just one point, there's a chance it could break through. So you need to think about your positioning before you go any further. I looked online at many home-built rigs. There were some made from extruded aluminium. They were way beyond what I could afford. They were also very limiting in the way that you can put them together. They are very boxy, right, everything's right angles. There was limited adaptability to it to place a shelf where you needed one, or a panel here and a panel there. So I decided definitely that was out from the start. Those that are into racing games tend to use this extruded metal because of the strength and the rigidity. It wasn't what I needed. I do not tend to use many racing games. I saw some made from plumber's pipe, and although they look quite good, very modern, very space age, they just did not seem suitable for what I needed it for. Again, they were very hard to add to and place shelves exactly where you wanted them. The strength of them was also another thing that I thought of. If they are stuck together, then they are supposed to be quite rigid. There's many videos online of people doing this, but again, it just wasn't for me. I saw videos on people making wooden varieties, and although they were better, they still did not have the ability to provide both a driving environment and one that was suitable for the office style work or the book writing, website creation that I do. Cost was my biggest limiting factor. Have suffered several strokes now, so I'm unable to work anymore. So it's taken me a very long time to save up enough to purchase the Logitech G29 and the game software. And whatever I built would have to be from what I already had, and anything extra I had to keep costs down to a minimum. Uh, Same with making this video. I'm not sponsored by anybody. I'm not been on here very long, and there's no companies that are throwing equipment my way. Everything I've got, I've had to save up for and buy. When you're on benefits, that's not an easy task. Space was also very limited in the flat I was in. As I said, I only had an alcove beside the fireplace and very little room around it. There was nowhere else that I could actually place my simulator rig. Yet it also, whatever I built would have to hold everything that I currently had on my desk. So I needed a place to store literally everything you see in the original picture. It needed to be easily accessible from my bed legs. I didn't want to be climbing over and into a cockpit, so I needed something that I could step into more like a car. It also needed to be very comfortable and very supportive, as I've got a bad back too. Before I started building, I made many sketches on what I thought I wanted. I decided on using wood as it was easier to work with for me, and it can also be altered later. It's easy to fill holes or screw in shelves or add bits to it, even fit brackets. It proved to be a good choice, as I came across many unseen issues that later on needed to be altered. A home built rig is not the same as a pre-built flat pack. It takes a lot of trial and error, and you do make many mistakes. I've rebuilt parts of my rig more than once to make it function well, and it will always be an ongoing project. Prior to the build, well, I live in a rural area. Finding what I needed was very difficult, and I had to search the local internet for many months before I found a suitable car seat. Originally, I wanted a heated seat that I could attach to a 12-volt power supply for the cold weather, just to make myself more comfortable. Unfortunately, I couldn't find one of these, so I ended up with a seat from an old Vauxhall Astra. But it's comfortable, and it's suitable for what I need it for, and it is very supportive on my back. In fact, I'm far more comfortable sitting in the chair than I am when I was originally had my gaming chair. I didn't have the wood suitable for the base, so I had to go out and buy that from builder's merchant, and all that was extremely difficult during the times of the COVID. Unlike the other builds that I'd seen online, which tended to be longer but narrower, I decided on making mine 3 foot wide by 4 foot long. It better fitted the space that I had free, and it would accommodate a few of my extra parts. My flat had limited space to assemble, so I had to do it, most of it, the initial stuff, on top of my freezer in the hallway. Also, I had very limited tools. On the baseboard, which was just MDF, I fitted 2 lengths of, I believe they were 4 by 1. Uh, I glued these into place and screwed from underneath so they wouldn't move. I then fitted 2 cross members, which was there to give it support and stability, and also to hold the seat. Originally I'd built it with these about 3/4 of the way along. But then I realised that with the chair mounted onto them, it did not give enough adjustability, to slide the chair back or forward for different height people. I fitted the chair and screwed it down. I must have done this a few times to get the positioning right, and the height was measured by using my car as a guide. So I went out and worked out how high the seat base was from the floor of the car, etc. I needed to make the rig mobile. I realised it would be pushed in against the wall, so there would be times when I need to move it out to clean or to get behind it to make alterations to the computer. I found some old casters from a computer chair and a couple that were on a movable radiator, and I thought this would be ideal to make it easy to move it around. That was my first big error. They proved to be less strong than what I thought they were, and they soon snapped off, tilting me at a weird angle, and then gradually I went right down to the floor. I replaced these with the types of wheels that you get on pushchairs and buggies. Unfortunately, I couldn't get metal ones. The only ones were polypropylene. They were far too weak, and I think they were on about half an hour before the weight of the unit just bent them in half. So that idea had to be thrown out the window. It took me a couple of weeks then to find something to replace them, and I eventually found some industrial grade casters like they use on a shopping cart in the supermarket, and they were around £6 each, and I managed to bolt these under the base and I actually fitted an extra strip of wood across front and back to give extra support and extra thickness to bolt into. Must admit, they have been perfect, and I wish I'd done that from the start. The next part of the build was the measuring up, and I must say, working on my own, this was the hardest part of all. It's very hard to establish at what height to have your desk part, your tabletop, when you're sitting in a chair like a car chair, trying to hold out in front of you a large piece of wood to which is attached a steering wheel, and then trying to do this with one hand while using a tape measure to get the height. You definitely need two or more people around to help you with this, to hold up the desk panel while you work out the right position, the right angle, and get the right measurements. It took me a couple of days to get this right, and I ended up building piles up either side, piles of books, boxes, buckets, everything I could find around the house, trying to get the right height for the tabletop in front of me. Again, I went out to the car and I measured the centre of the wheel to the floor, the distance from the seat to the steering wheel, just trying to get everything right. But it was still a pain. So if you're going to do this part, get a friend around or someone to help you. I fitted two really thick uprights on either side. I spaced them out on the picture you see top right on one side, but I had to put them closer together on the other side to give me enough foot room to get in and out in front of the seat. On top of that, I had to fit a second shelf. I used an old CD rack at first, which created a box section that you can see on here, and put the shelf onto the top of that and supported it at the rear. That was to put the monitors on, so it needed to be strong and solid. At the side of me, I also had to build another little box, a stable box that I could bolt the gear changer onto. Um, the design of the rig meant that my computers were actually fitted in, as you can see on the bottom photograph. That was the main PC, and the bottom right hand of the image is the second computer, which is beside the seat, which is now covered over with a piece of sponge, making an armrest. Uh, Again, you got to build all these shelves at the right height, but you had to consider leaving enough room for ventilation. The ventilation is on the side of that computer. On the second computer, it's on the other side, so I had to have them facing in opposite directions. I wanted it to become part of the the dashboard area, if you like, because it had my DVD player built into it. Let me move forward another image. Right. It was all beginning to take shape, but it was only still usable as a driving simulator. Using runners from an old cabinet that I found, I created a slide out tray below the steering wheel. I also built a swivelling shelf on the right side for my mouse and mouse pad. When using just as a desk, I can slide my chair back away from the wheel and then just pull out the keyboard shelf in front of me and type as I would normally. Even in game, you can pull it out halfway and reach the keys that you need while you're playing the game. Buying a full motion rig was just a daydream. It was way out of the reach of my pocket. So I tried to add some more realism by fitting a small shelf just above the pedals so it didn't interfere with my feet. And on this I secured the big bass woofer from my surround sound system. This actually vibrates the cocoon part of the rig so that in the simulation games you can really feel the engine noise, and it makes it far more immersive. To make it more comfortable and to make it a little warmer, because I found it did get quite cold inside as it blocked out the general heating in the room. I covered it all with carpet. Um, Even the panels that I had later on, I added carpet too. It did make it much warmer, and if you're moving your legs around, it's better to be on the carpet than it is onto a rough piece of wood. The remaining 5 speakers of the surround sound were fitted around the rig. 2 were fitted, as you can see in the photograph, either side of where my shoulders would be in the chair, and the other 3 are hidden behind the monitors at the front. I used another thin panel of MDF to create a side panel. This covered up the 2 computers that were there, protecting them from damage and being banged, especially by young children running around. I had to drill many holes into the MDF panel that lined up with the ventilation outlets of the 2 computers, and I just covered these with a plastic grill that I got from the DIY shop. I also fitted a panel on the other side which I made into a door. Um, On the inside of this, there's a sliding bolt that I can lock, which, when you've got young children running around, it can be very. Well, the whole unit is very attracted to them. They make a beeline for it straight away. And if you've got things running, you don't want them pressing buttons, and especially turning your computer off or on when you're not around. So having a lock on hidden away on the inside of the door was a priority. The support bar at the back was removed just after I'd finished doing this part. Um, I made it so the chair could even travel back further. You can now sit someone who's 6'6" inside the chair, and yet my grandson can sit in there and move the chair forward and still reach the pedals. So it's much more adaptable. It was around this time that I found out that I had to move out of my flat, and I must admit panic did set in. After building all this and getting it working, the last thing I wanted to do was to take it apart, but it wouldn't fit through the door, or the opening of the doors, and I couldn't carry it down the stairs as it was. So yes, I did have to take it all apart and rebuild it once I'd moved. The place being offered to me was far smaller than what I originally had, and there would be no room for the separate hi-fi cupboard that used to sit beside it that held the amplifier, the radio, the DVD, VCR, and my printer. So I had to rethink how I was going to store these and attach it all back together. There's many pre-made accessories available online for simulation rigs. You can buy button boxes, alternative gear shifters, and indicator stalks, but they all tend to be very, very high price. I couldn't afford nearly £100 just to use indicators, so I decided to build my own. I started off at first, I just stuck an old mouse, it was a Wi-Fi mouse, with onto the side of the steering block with blue tack. The buttons were facing towards me, and I set the left button for turning right and the right button for turning left, and I just flicked them with my fingers while I was driving. This was only a temporary measure, but it worked. But I later managed to build something a bit more permanent, and I purchased a three-way momentary toggle switch, one that is on, off and on. The centre point is the off position, and it's what it defaults back to. It must be a momentary toggle switch and not a on-off switch that locks into position. It only cost me £2 via Amazon, and then I bought a mouse for £1 from the pound shop. I took apart the mouse and I wired the switch to the left and right buttons on the circuit board. It wasn't hard to find where it was. You could see where the buttons went, and you could see the soldered points of the switches from the buttons. So it was quite easy to find out. Building a simple stand using a fruit, well, I had about 4, I think, L brackets that I drilled out the hole so the switch would fit, and bolted them all together to make something that I could angle and get at the right height. I fitted this beside the steering wheel, as you can see in the pictures. The switch only had a small metal toggle, far too small, so I managed to superglue a piece of plastic tubing over the toggle of the switch, and then I just stuck on a cap that I found in my toolbox. In the game, I set the left and right mouse buttons as the options for the indicators. So if you go into ATS and go down the list of controls, you highlight the indicator and then flick the switch to for the left turn, right turn, etc. It was quite easy to do, and it's worked out really well. Uh, I'm not going to pay out that sort of money for a more realistic looking one when this works just fine. There were some big changes after I moved the house. Due to receiving some back pay, I was able to purchase a much more powerful computer. I also got myself Track IR to wear on your head so you can look left and right in game. I'm sure most of you have seen that in use. If not, there's a piece of it on my website that explains it all. The new computer has a glass seal panel with LED lighting on one side. It was also taller and it was also wider than the original PC that I had in there. So I had to take the side panel off and cut a great big hole in it around the new computer and rebuild the framework behind it, the shelves that I'd built to support computers, so everything went back to the right height. At the same time, I raised up the monitors. I found they were too low down and I was getting a bit of neck ache while playing the game because my vision was at the wrong angle. So I raised the monitors by a few inches. I also wanted to angle the big TV screen that I have above the others towards me. I did this by, I think it was about 22 degrees. When you're doing work on a screen, you want to be looking at it dead on. And when it was right up there, tilting your head up, you was looking at it a little off. And it's only when you go to move a mouse or do something that's very pinpoint that you find that looking at an angle just doesn't work. So the upper screen is now angled towards me more. Doing so, I had to rebuild the tower, if you can call it that, behind the monitors. Originally there was just one shelf, but I had to build on top of that a secondary shelf to sit the TV, and the TV, I had to do it so the shelf was angled. I drilled through the base of the TV and that shelf and bolted it down so it was secure, so it would not fall on top of me. Raising the other three monitors also created a big gap underneath now that let all the light through, and it was just didn't look quite right. It was a good thing I did it really, because it's now given me time, or given me the space to build a higher panel that wraps around behind the steering wheel. You'll see more of that as we go on. Now the unit's more self-contained and it's easier to move for cleaning and performing maintenance or making any changes. The amplifier and the radio is built onto the front of the unit. It doesn't look brilliant at the moment, but it works. It just means I can simply pull the back of the unit to one side or wheel it out the way when I'm hoovering or if I need to do any work on it. The foam pipe legging that I use to cover the edges of wood, I might replace with a thicker form of rubber sheathing. The foam does last a fair time, but when your elbows are laying on it, it does compress a bit and it can tend to split after time. I only put it on to save getting splinters or scratching myself on the edges of the wood. Now everything's in place, I can start to think about making better colours for the front. Um, Although the door that you see on there is all made of wood, those two front squares that are towards the window, they're actually only cardboard and painted over to match. I have got the wood put aside to redo that, and then I can paint it or whatever I'm going to do with it. I'm not quite sure yet. I won't be leaving it that red, that's for certain. As I said, I built these dash panels that go behind the steering wheel. Originally, I bought an instrument cluster from a breaker's yard that I was going to wire in using an Arduino board. I'd seen it done on videos on YouTube, and I thought I'd have a go at doing it myself. My programming knowledge of Arduino is next to nothing, and my understanding of the electronics to do with cars is even worse. Uh, I had trouble trying to work out the different pinouts from the cluster and match them to what I needed on the Arduino. There was 4 plugs on the back of the unit, which each had, I think, up to about 30 pins, and I just could not work out what one did what. The ones online showed you how to do it with a BMW dashboard, but the dashboard I bought from the breakers was one from a Peugeot Boxer van, and I didn't want to take the chance of blowing up my computer by getting it wrong. So instead I decided to go digital. I already use Sim Dashboard uh, with the game ever since I first got it. Um, with Sim Dashboard you can design your own screens to match the individual game you play. The screen that you can see on the top left, is the one I currently use when I'm driving with ETS or ATS. However, that screen is no good when you're using GTA 5 or Forza or any other driving game. But SimDash gives you the ability to create specific screens for specific games, and it's clever enough to know when you change games it will flash up on the tablets, do you want to use this game, and you just tap it and it will change to that particular screen. I got 3 tablets. The centre one is a 7-inch, all of them are Android. Centre one I just use for a speedometer, basically. It's got the indicator lights on it as well. On the one you can see I've also got the tachometer. The outer ones are for the other gauges you need, the other information you need to keep track of. As I explain it further, you'll see that the one on the right I will no longer need to have so many of the switches on. So I can actually revert that one back to being like a sat-nav. The new panels that I built around these tablets, or actually I built the units and then stuck the tablets onto them with Velcro so that I can take them off to use them. I've fitted, oh God knows how many buttons, 5, 10, 15, about 18 buttons on either side, each doing various tasks like turning on lights or opening windows and attaching trailers, brakes, etc., etc. Each board, left and right, has two zero delay USB boards on the back. They were dead easy to fit and wire up. Everything just plugged in. Uh, they come with all the wires you need. You just have to fit your switches and take the lead from the switch and plug it into the board. Then you can set everything else up in game. I've got 4 altogether. Finding enough USB ports was hard, but I've now got a key ignition that you turn the ignition on and it lights up the start button and everything else. Later on it will also turn on the LED lighting that I intend to place around the cockpit. But now I can get rid of the keyboard, or not get rid of it, but I do not have to pull it out to be able to attach the trailer or turn on the headlights or do whatever I need to do. It just makes it more realistic, and it's much easier and enjoyable to play the game. There's been many changes since I've started to build the rig, and no doubt there'll be many more to come as it evolves and my needs change. As I said, the amplifier and the radio units are now mounted behind the dashboard panels. A shelf has been added at the back of my seat, which holds my printer, which gets rid of some of the masses of cabling that go round the sim rig. Keeps it all as one self-contained unit that's easy to move around. I've also added a professional streaming microphone on one side. I also attached a mock roll bar. I made this from the plumbing pipe that I talked about earlier, and a few elbows. It's just screwed into the wooden sides of the rig. Its purpose is not so much to be or imitate a roll bar, but it's to enable me to mount webcams to it, additional lighting sources, and it also supports my green screen. If there's room behind the seat, I've got a pop-up round green screen that I can put behind my seat and lean against this. So that's the reason behind that part. The second PC that sits beside me now displays onto a separate 22-inch screen that sits on a wall shelf that's beside the actual sim rig unit. It's still linked to the main PC so that I can run Twitch and OBS on that, leaving all the main computer's resources for the simulation game and for the operation of the controls. Well, that's about it on this video. If you wanted to know more, please feel free to leave a comment or email me or visit my website, whatever you want to do, and I'm happy to answer any questions or explain in more detail what I did to create this or that. If I make any changes, I will make a follow-up video later on, and on the website there is a page dedicated to the building of the unit that I have, and I'm forever updating that anytime I make a change. Like they all say, please hit the like buttons and the follow me buttons and everything else. As I said, I am new, and any views all helps. It gives me motivation to start making more videos and improving my skills in doing so, and I will then have more editing abilities to start working on the gameplay videos that I intend to put out. Well, thanks for looking, and I'll catch you again.